Steam locomotives in miniature at the Steam Workshop. This is called John's Beautiful Midland Spinner, the North British engine repair, plus some cleaning and painting. Today I'm finishing off the North British engine repair. Unfortunately, this engine was quite badly damaged in transit on its way to the Steam Workshop, and it was the cab that suffered most of the damage. It was very mangled. If you've been watching this series recently, you'll see what I did. I removed the cab, then the spectacle plate, beat out the spectacle plate so it was flat again, then I filled and painted the spectacle plate, and this clip shows me refitting the cab to the main body of the locomotive, and I'm using 8BA bolts with nuts on the inside. So that's fixed and it can go back on the shelf. And now it's time to continue rebuilding the V1 locomotive. This is the boiler wrapper, and unfortunately at each end of the boiler wrapper it's quite rusty. This is no good at all. There's only one way to do the job properly, and that is to remove the rust. I also noticed that the paint wasn't very well stuck to the wrapper. The metal hadn't been keyed at all before the paint was put on. The metal underneath the paint was very shiny. Over to the bead blasting cabinet, it took me about half an hour to get all of the paint off the wrapper. In this clip I'm just removing the remnants of the paint that the bead blaster left, and here I'm using something called panel wipe. It's a liquid and it's great to use. You put it on a cloth, and I'm using it to wipe off everything from the surface of the metal prior to painting. And while Dave is in the spray booth currently painting the boiler wrapper, I'm treating parts of the rear buffer beam to some etch primer. A lot of the red paint was firmly stuck to the buffer beam, so if it's firmly stuck to the buffer beam, just rub it down and use it as an undercoat. But certain areas were quite rusty, particularly the part around the buffer stocks, so I remove the paint entirely from this area, and before I repaint the buffer beam in its correct red colour, I'm applying some etch primer to any bare metal parts. So what colour should I paint this buffer beam? Well, there's only one really for me, it's this. P994 Buffer Beam Vermilion Gloss. There are many miniature locomotives in the Steam Workshop, and when I look around the locomotives in the Steam Workshop, it's amazing how many different shades of red adorn the buffer beams of all these locomotives. So here's a quick rundown of the colours. Some people paint the buffer beams in Humbrol red, some people use post office red, some people use something known as buffer beam red. But as you can see here, I think the best colour is definitely this vermilion. This vermilion paint that I'm using to paint the buffer beam is from Phoenix Paints, and it's called Precision Paints. It's really good to use, but a quick tip, don't apply the paint too thick because a drip on a buffer beam will look really unsightly, and you don't want to paint out any detail of the nuts and bolts that may be on the buffer beam. And while on the subject of detail, have a look at this. This is an unfinished Midland spinner, and it belongs to John at the Steam Workshop. And, well, there's not a lot I can say about this. The detail is remarkable. Although there's nothing really remarkable about the toolboxes and the water filler, the hinges are pretty neat. But it's detail like this that makes a difference. I mean, come on, just look at this. It's a small part that fits over the reversing screw so that you know where you are between forward and reverse. Or as it says on the part, forward and backward. The attention to detail on this engine is rather wonderful. Have a look at the quality and the detail of the backhead. I've seen quite a lot of really good show-stopping locomotives, and this is one of them. Okay, it's not finished, I'm aware of that, but just look at it. The shape and the fit of the dome onto the boiler wrapper is impeccable, as is the fitting behind the dome. This is not even fastened down, it's just sat on the top of the boiler. And then we have this part. This is the fancy bit in the middle of the wheel, which is an oil box, and it's the main outer bearing. And as for the inspection hatches at the front of the locomotive, well, what can I say other than they're quite good. That is the art of understatement. Everywhere that I look on this locomotive, the quality of the engineering is impeccable. And not just on the locomotive part, this is the 8-wheel tender, which is built to the same high standard. And all of the oil boxes, which are very small, are 100% functional. Then we get down to this level. This is a fitting, and I got it really close to the camera, and as you can see, it has writing on it. I use the camera to see the writing. In this clip I'm holding the part about 1 centimetre from the lens. I bought one of these engines that was part finished in the 1980s, and I refinished it and I ran it, and it ran very well. but not as well as this one. Most of the noise in that clip, by the way, was from the compressor working in the background. And for some lucky person somewhere in the world, this engine is for sale. It's for sale as it is. John doesn't have the time to finish it owing to work commitments. The engine is for sale in exactly the condition that you see it in. It works, but it needs finishing. And the current date is the 26th of May 2018. So if you're watching this video in the year 2525, it's probably sold. But at this moment in time, it is for sale. It is jaw-droppingly beautiful, and you need to contact Simon at the Steam Workshop for details. The website address is at the beginning and at the end of this video. And I wouldn't think that this locomotive is going to be for sale for very long. So if you're interested in buying it, I would suggest that you contact the Steam Workshop fairly quickly. Here's a clip of the North British locomotive that I've just been repairing. The roof looks a bit strange because I'd only just painted the roof and the paint is currently drying. So here's a picture of the paint drying on the roof of a North British model locomotive. And to conclude this video, I'm showing some parts from the V1 locomotive. These are the footplate parts which were very rusty and they've just come out of the bead blaster. Whenever I use the bead blaster, I always follow up the job with some sandpaper to really roughen up the parts to take the coat of paint. As you can see here, these footplate parts are really badly pitted. So I'm going to rub them down with some very coarse sandpaper over this pitted area before I pass them on to Dave for painting. Hopefully these parts should have a new lease of life after they've been painted. And that's it for this episode. I'll finish it off with a period type shot of the Midland spinner. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful.